Hello and welcome to Tommy's Game Table. My name's Tommy and today we're going to be talking about how to start your first game. Alright, so now that you have a bit of a basic understanding of what Dungeons & Dragons is and tabletop gaming and things like that, now we're going to talk about how we're actually going to get a group of friends together to start a game so you can start having some fun. Now that we've watched a couple of these videos, you've got a basic understanding of what tabletop gaming is. So we've briefly touched on a couple of basics that you might need. It literally comes down to just downloading some rules for a game set that you like the look of. Get yourself some dice, you don't need this many, just get yourself one set of dice. So you've gotten your dice, you've either downloaded some free rules off of a game that you found, or you've bought some books or something of some games that you like the look of. You've got your character sheet, you've got everything ready to rock and roll. You just don't know where to start, how to get this game going with some friends. The first question I always get asked is, how do you find people to play this game? And there's a few different ways of doing this. One of them is just the old school method of just asking your friends. So like, have you ever heard of this Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or whatever game you're going to play? Obviously, like, I always try to target your friends that are already into this kind of stuff. I've got a few friends who only like riding motorbikes and playing music, and I've got other friends who are into watching Star Wars and don't mind watching Lord of the Rings. So in the game that I'm running at the moment, I have a couple of new players who've never played anything like this before, and I'm very happy to say that they're absolutely loving it, and they didn't know if they were going to at the start, so that's great. So you can just ask people. I ask people through my work. One of them was a friend already who kind of mentioned that he was already half interested in something like this. Another way is like, I've just asked customers at the shop who I get along with really well and then create a bit of an organic relationship. If you're a little bit more shy, you might be able to even do this online through your social medias like Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media that you use. Just put it out there. You can always jump on and find groups in your local area. I know where I come from, there's probably about 3 different Facebook groups, and it's just full of people who are willing and ready to rock and roll with a game. They're just always keen. So chances are there's going to be something like that in your town. But I'm also painfully aware of the fact I grew up in a extremely small town where the only people who are into this kind of stuff was me, my brother, my stepdad, and a couple of random misfit friends that we made over the years. So sometimes I get it, it can be really hard. So there's also great things online like Discord, all kinds of places where you can go and meet people who start off being total strangers, but you might end up making a friend for life. So there's always the online option as well if you're either not in a great location or you're just a little bit more shy about putting yourself out there in the public community. Another spot is you can also go down to your local gaming store if you have the luxury of having a gaming store or a hobby store. Asking the owner of the business or one of the managers, chances are if they don't already run a regular game, they might know somebody who does, and it might be at the shop, they might do it from a hall in their town or something like that. I personally run all of my games out of my business, which is a barbershop. It's got nothing to do with Dungeons & Dragons at all. So that's something that I think is also very important, is working out where you're going to do it. I like playing on places with neutral ground. Some people feel more comfortable at home. I've got a kid and I've got pets, distractions. So I prefer to do it somewhere where I can just lock the doors, close the blinds, and lose track of time and have as much fun as we want. Another thing is there's obviously a huge overwhelming amount of rules and things that you need to know. So another option, and this is basically what I did, I had the luxury of being taught 2nd edition of Dungeons & Dragons way back in probably the late 90s or early 2000s, and it was off of a photocopied few sheets that my stepdad managed to get when he owned a pool hall years ago, back in the 80s or something, off of a few people who used to come in and play games there. So we were lucky enough to have a couple of free rule sets, and that's how we learned how to play the game. And then years and years later, when I actually wanted to start running, be in my own games and play with some of my own friends, and my stepdad doesn't really play anymore, my brother lives literally on the other side of the country in Australia, it made it a lot harder to find friends to play. I'd met way more people probably through the music industry and through the barbering industry, motorbikes, all that kind of stuff, things that are not very related to pop culture and gaming and such. So I was struggling to try and find people to join as a player just so I could have a bit of a refresher, which I highly recommend if you can find people. but I'm the type of person where if I want to do something, I'll just go out and do it. So I bought the new edition Player's Handbook and I just read it front to back. I watched heaps of stuff on YouTube and I started asking people if they wanted to join a game that I was going to run, because if people don't have to put in any work or effort, they're probably more likely to come and do something with you. So yeah, if you're planning on doing something like that, I just recommend either getting the free rules and just reading it as much as you can, listen to some playthrough podcasts, watch things like Critical Role. There's heaps of like live playthrough games on YouTube. There's also a bunch of other people out there explaining the rules, and even specific DM sort of channels like the DM Lair and stuff like that. So definitely jump on and have a bit of a look. How many people do you need to run a game? Look, most people say that the sweet spot is probably anywhere from 4 to 6 players. I've run games with as many as 9 players, which I don't recommend because that's a lot of hard work, and especially if you're just getting started out, I would cap it at about 4 players. Honestly, if you're a new DM, I'd cap it at about 4. 6 if you're really good friends and you're very patient people. But I've also run games where it's just me running the game and one other player. And some people say that it can't be done, but I've had hours and hours of fun doing that, and vice versa. And so if you have one friend who's interested in this, you can literally take turns at being the dungeon master and the players and just swap every couple of sessions. And you'll be surprised just how much fun you can have with just one other person. I guess the more the merrier within reason, but don't let numbers be the reason why you're not getting into this game. So something we also briefly touched on is character building. This is something that I think is really important in something that we're going to talk about, which is a session 0 game. So now that you have your players, you've got your location, whether it's online or at a hall or at somebody's house, now you just want to get everybody together and talk about what the expectations of this game is going to be. You want to talk about people's experience level with this game, how little they know about it, how much they know about it. It gives the Dungeon Master an opportunity to see what kind of game that these players want to play in, whether it's going to be high fantasy or sci-fi or anything like that. Something that's really important is talking about the social etiquette of how to run a game. I personally don't like anything that has any hateful or prejudiced sort of content within reason. Sometimes it's good to tackle social aspects in a gaming setting, and it's amazing what you can learn about yourself and grow as people. But there's definitely some taboo subjects which I just like to rule out straight away, put it out there so that everybody knows that if you're going to try and do something like this in a game, we're going to stop and we're going to have words and we're going to start again. I think these kind of things just stop the game from getting a bit jaggy later on down the track. You want to manage people's expectations from the get-go. And if you have players that, they want to play in games that tackle those taboo subjects, or they want to, do whatever it is at the table that you mightn't agree with, that's totally fine. People are their own people. You don't control one another, so they're more than happy to go off and start their own game or find another group of people, and just learning to be completely okay with that. There's no reason why anybody should be having fallings out over playing a game. It's also a great opportunity just to talk about even house rules. Again, I run my shops in the barber shop, so I just let everybody know where the toilet is, where they can make themselves a cup of coffee, if they want to bring, their own drinks and stuff like that, where the fridge is. If I have players who are smokers, we smoke cigarettes outside, don't smoke inside, just real basic stuff. But again, it's way better to tackle all this stuff early on so that you don't have any awkward moments later on down the track. Once you've got all the boring stuff out of the way and all the what I think is quite necessary stuff out of the way, now we can really start talking about what kind of game you want. And this is why I think a session 0 is really important, especially if you're playing with new players, which is what this whole channel is about. It's either coming back to this game after having years away from it or being brand new to it. So talk about what kind of characters you'd like to make, whether or not you're going to be righteous heroes who are just out there to save people, or if you're going to be a little bit morally ambiguous, or you can even run an evil campaign. A little bit harder earlier on, but it's definitely doable. I highly recommend, especially early days of playing this game, coming up with a little bit of a backstory as to how all the players already know each other. Because I've played in games where we don't know each other, and you can spend the first 3 or 4 hours trying to meet each other in game. It's not the funnest way to play the game. You want to go out there and start, taking on adventures, fighting monsters, working out mysteries, solving crimes, doing all the fun stuff. So I personally think it's always good to have some form of backstory, even if it's in the coming weeks leading up to this moment as to how you all know each other. And in saying that, this is an opportunity for the Dungeon Master to talk about your backstories and seeing if they can tie it into the game that they're writing, or even something that they've bought, and they can see a little bit of a window where they can make you feel like this story is actually written for you. It's written for your character, and you're going to be a character and a main in this story. So for example, in my game at the moment, I'm running a campaign where I have someone who just picked something really simple in their character build. They wanted to be a brewer, and they've got brew supplies, and there's a couple of other people who had some handy skills of that, of very similar natures. The backstory was, I kept it really simple. They were just contracted to go and help set up a new settlement, and they were on a ship on the way back to the town where they'd paid for lodging. It can be that simple. You don't need to be brothers or have fought in a war together. You might have just spent a week together on a job site. It can be as in-depth or as impersonal as you like. It can stop the game from getting bogged down in the boring stuff. Another thing I also recommend as a Dungeon Master, and I recommend that you do this if you're going to be DMing for your players, is ask your players to write a little bit of an origin story about their character. Batman's, I'm going to use him as another great example. The reason why he is, his parents got murdered in an alleyway in front of his very eyes, and he, since that moment, just wanted to seek justice. He wanted to see the people who were out there doing the wrongdoings be brought to justice, and that's when the Batman was created. So it can be something like that. And I've got a character in my game who is a gnome wizard, and he has a letter from a colleague who's passed away. And that's all the information that this person gave to me. Little do they know, this is going to play a major role in this story, and the colleague of this character has actually found out the big bad's plan and everything that's gone down and has been assassinated. That's how they've passed away. That's what the information on the letter is, but it's very vague. And so this can be your plot hook. This is something that I personally didn't even think of until my player said that they had this origin story. So you can go into heaps of depth or just keep it on the surface just to have a little bit more fun and make your characters feel like they're immersed in this story that you're telling. One thing I think is probably the most important thing to do, either at the beginning, the middle, or the end of your session 0, is work out scheduling. I can't tell you the amount of games that I've been in that have just fizzled because we can't work out when we can all get together and play. The rule that we have in our group is we have 4 players and I'm running the game, so 5 people all up. Obviously if the Dungeon Master can't make it, you can't play the game. But my rule is if one player can't make it, we still play, and we just, one of the other players or myself will play that character and just say that they're a little bit out of it this round. Or even you can have that player go off to do some other kind of mission or go off to gather intel or something. In saying that, the rule is if we have more than one, if we have 2 or more players who can't make it, we cancel and reschedule. We have a few people who do shift work and stuff like that. I try to always run my games based off the busiest person in the group. So if people are free most weekends, they're sweet. You can kind of send them a message a week before out. But if you have people who do have very tight and moving schedules, I always try to put a little bit of the power in their hands just so they don't feel like they're constantly letting people down, because they want to play just as much as anybody else. We briefly touched on character building, and don't worry, we're going to go into a really deep dive into this kind of thing across all different platforms. But we're just going to briefly touch on it again. The Session 0 is also a really great opportunity for you guys to come together and write your characters. I'll recommend my players just do some basic YouTubing and some little bit of Google searching just to see what classes and races there actually are in the game that you're playing, whether you're playing Starfinder or Dungeons and Dragons or Star Wars. Just a really quick Google search with whatever game you're playing at the end will come up with a whole bunch of information. You don't have to go out and spend a heap of money, and that'll just give you a bit of an idea before you get to the Session 0 games, just to give you a bit of a rough idea of what you'd like. Sometimes group dynamics work really well, like if you like having the classic party where you have someone who's a bit of a tank, someone who deals massive damage, someone who heals people, and then a bit of a support character who can do a little bit of everything, a few skills. That's always fun, especially if you're early into the game. It just gives you a lot of answers and options, but it's also not the most important thing. And in fact, I love running games where the party is always missing something. Like if you have a party full of warriors and spellcasters, and you get to a locked door and you try not to make any noise, all of a sudden, what do you do? And I think those kind of moments are the most beautiful moments in tabletop gaming, in my opinion, is trying to think outside of the box and work out how your character, your limited character, can achieve this goal. Now again, like I say to new players, you can research as much or as little as you'd like about the game before you go to a session 0. I say to new players who join my games, like, I don't want you to really worry about anything. If you want to research some stuff, go for it, but you really don't have to. We're going to cover everything on the session 0. Take your time with this. Some people try to rush through the session 0. I'll even, for the most part, I won't even plan any actual game time in a session 0, other than maybe a really basic encounter, just to give the new players an idea of what the game actually is in person. But yeah, keep it really simple and take your time. Really work out what kind of story and characters you want, because this game could end up running for weeks, months, or even years. And look, the most important thing whenever you're playing any of these kind of games is just have an open mind and go into the process wanting to have fun, and you're going to have lots of fun. This is just a bit of a short video just to help people who have now watched a few of my videos, have made a few things, they have a bit of a grasp of what tabletop games are, and now they're ready to get going. This is the video for those people. And don't worry, we're going to go into far deeper dives on all of these subjects in coming videos as well. Now, don't forget, I've also got a Patreon set up. If you're looking at wanting to support this channel, it just helps me grow this channel and invest in more cameras and microphones and gear and stuff to make all these fun things that we're making on this channel. So jump on over to patreon.com/Tomi'sGameTable, and if you'd like to support, then that's where you can find all the information on being able to support me. So look, there's so many videos out there on YouTube, so I'd just very much like to thank you for clicking on this one. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.